Hey friends, welcome to Homegrown Florida. I'm Patrina and it is getting pretty warm down here. It is getting so hot that it's time to put our strawberries to bed and get our sweet potatoes started. So today we are going to be doing a GreenStalk vertical container garden reset. The first thing I need to get done on this reset is I gotta move these strawberries. Now you're probably seeing a lot of other plants in here. The strawberries are in there, but I did lose already about half of my strawberries. And then I have some calendula and some cabbage. It's a purple cabbage, that's what you see there. Now the calendula is still doing very well. The cabbage has got a lot of aphids. It's definitely out of season at this point. The strawberries, like I said, have already started to die off. This is very typical in Florida that we lose our strawberries during the summer. So what I like to do to try to reduce the loss so that I can perennialize some of these strawberries is to move them to a more shaded spot. So I do break apart this GreenStalk, which is the leaf GreenStalk. It's a shorter one. And I'm first going to clean things up. And the first thing I'm going to do here is remove some of these. I started these cabbages way late in the season, way later than I should have. And I knew it was kind of a gamble that they may or may not work out. And they didn't. I kind of had it in my head that, hey, there's nothing lost here. I have some extra seedlings. Let me just throw them in some empty spots and see how they did. And they grew, and I probably could have taken leaves from them, but it just wasn't enough time. Also, these containers were very short. They're meant for strawberries and maybe lettuce, not for a deep grower like a cabbage. So none of them headed up. And I was like, okay, no worries. Let's get these guys out. Let's call it a day with the cool weather crops. It's well past the time that they needed to grow. And let me consolidate this GreenStalk so that all my strawberries are together in just a couple tiers. I had started out with 30 bare root strawberry plants back in fall, and then I went on vacation and I lost some when I went on vacation because I wasn't there to water them. So the only thing that was watering them was the rain. And I did have a couple bloom lots in some of them to try to like a self-watering system, but not with the strawberries. So it was just rain and some of my sprinklers were hitting them. And it was enough to keep probably about 20 to 25 of the bare roots alive. And then when I got back, I treated them very, very well. You know, I watered them well, I fed them well, I gave them the proper amount of sun, and they produced a crop. Not as heavy as I'm used to, but they did decent. I think just because they had a tough start to life by being so neglected for those couple of months that we were traveling in our RV, that they just didn't produce as much as I have had in the past, but they did well. So now what I'm doing is I'm consolidating. I'm moving some of my healthy strawberry plants from some of the GreenStalk tiers there so that I can get one or two tiers full of strawberries. The way I'm consolidating them is I'm just taking my little trowel here and I'm scooping underneath it, and I'm kind of just letting the roots hold together however they like. I'm not being real aggressive with it. I just dig down as deep as I could until I could feel them release, and then I lift the whole thing out gently, holding it by the roots as well as the stems of the plants, or using my trowel to kind of scoop up underneath it, and then I shift it into the spot. They have now been in this spot for I think it's a couple weeks now, and they all transplanted very well, which I was really surprised at. I thought maybe some of them would give me a little bit of a hard time, but no, they didn't seem to mind at all being transplanted this way. I know that you typically don't want to do this during this time period, like during the heat. You really want to do this when you're in the dormant stage, but I needed to get them consolidated. I ended up with 2.5 tiers. So I had 2 full tiers, so that would be 12 plants, and then I had maybe 3 more. So I probably ended up with 15 plants out of the 30 that I started with. And that's not the end of it, guys. These guys are going to go through another round of loss, because typically at this point or this stage, I lose 50% of my plants every year. Because of the heat. They don't like our summers here, and they just do poorly through the summer, so I usually lose about 50%. In this particular variety of strawberry, these are brilliants. They just are not well known for runners. So I think out of all of these strawberries, I maybe had 2 runners. They don't create a lot of runners, which is a bummer because I wish they did. Now, when I grew Chandler, which I might go back to, they created a lot more runners, and I was able to take that 50% loss of plants that happened during the summer and replace them with runners. So I wouldn't, gain any plants, but I also wouldn't lose any plants. Whereas with the Brilliants, even though that they produce so much bigger, better, amazing berries, you kind of have to replace them every season or 2. I'm moving this over into a spot that is super, super shaded. It gets a little bit of sun in the morning, maybe like 2 hours, and the rest of the day it's this dapple shade or full shade. And that's going to help kind of reduce the amount of strawberries that are going to die. I'm putting the calendula up top, and I'll probably just keep filling this with whatever I have going on that season, any of my extra seedlings. That's kind of what I do here with my GreenStalks, is if I have any seedlings that didn't make it into a bed, like I have a bunch of petunias right now that didn't make a spot in the bed, so I might add them to some of these open spots near the calendula flowers. In past years, I also clipped off all the leaves of the strawberry plants to kind of force them into a semi-dormancy, but I'm not going to do that this year. I'm kind of curious if I'll do better by not clipping the leaves and just going straight to shade, or at the end of the season, I'll let you guys know if that ended up doing better or not. Now, in its place, in that full sun spot that I have there, I am going to start putting in my sweet potatoes. I did this last year, and I gotta tell you, I am in love with growing sweet potatoes in GreenStalk containers, because it just kind of keeps the craziness that happens with sweet potatoes in a confined area. Like when I grow them in my beds, they get completely wild and out of control. But when I grow them in a GreenStalk, it feels like I can manage the vines a little bit better and control how they're growing. And what I mean by that is when I grow them in a bed, I allow the vines to sprawl out, and a lot of the times they will re-root along the soil in the bed. By putting them in a GreenStalk, I'm not allowing them to re-root, and I did notice more productivity. Now, putting them in a container does make the sweet potatoes smaller typically, but the productivity seemed to be higher in the GreenStalks than in my garden beds the last 2 years in a row. Part of that is the re-rooting situation, but the other part of that is my beds. I have worked on the soil so much over the years that it is so enriched. I did a soil test, and it's like 3 times the amount of enrichment that's required, meaning a lot of organic materials were added between compost and mulches and just, throwing the plant debris back in the beds, burying food scraps. All that stuff has created so much richness to the soil. Sweet potatoes don't like enriched soil. They really kind of like crappy soil. And to be honest, they love growing in our Florida native sand because it's just crappy soil. It's sandy, it's loose, it dries out nice and quick, and it has a limited amount of nutrients. When you have too much nitrogen, you get like huge vines, and if you get too much phosphorus, it messes with the sweet potatoes. They kind of like the tropical thing. They like the sandy soil. So the soil that I'm putting into this, I had filled it up before I moved it over here, and it's a mix of about 50% sand and 50% potting mix is what I used. I used my Pro Mix, and it's actually used Pro Mix. So it wasn't Pro Mix fresh out of the bag. I actually took some Pro Mix that I had in another GreenStalk that I eliminated, that I kind of, compress things down so that I've consolidated them. So it's used soil. So not only am I going with sand, and it's the native sand from my garden. I didn't buy sand. I just took some native sand from a project we were working on with a French drain that my husband put in. So we had all this native sand. So I did 50% native sand, 50% of used container soil of Pro Mix. And then I just sprinkled in a little bit of garden tone fertilizer, and that's it. I moved them over into this spot without adding the water to it because they're already so heavy from the sand and the soil. I didn't want to add on to that water. Once you start putting water in these things, man, they get so heavy, it's difficult for me to lift them at that point. So I do it with them unwatered, and that helps. They're already super heavy, but it takes a while to water them because these are big, deep pots. They're about 12 inches deep, and there's 6 spots inside of each one of the tiers. And so this is heavy. So, and it takes a lot of water to fill these up. So I take a little time and I water each pocket. I water the top. I put the reservoir in there. I added a little bit of extra soil, make sure that it tops off well. And then I stepped away from it for an hour or two and just kind of let it soak in. And then I took my moisture meter and I checked it and watered it again, just making sure that every single one of the tiers was nice and moist, because we're going to transplant some sweet potato slips. You can see here that this thing is as tall as me. This is one of the reasons why I do not stack my GreenStalks at the height that they suggest. They suggest to do 5 tiers. I normally don't because I can't even see into the water reservoir at this height. But I wanted to try it because I really wanted a little bit more sweet potatoes this year than I had last year. And last year I only did 4 tiers. So I'm going to try to get along with the 5 tiers, even though I can't really see up into the watering reservoir. But we're going to see how it goes. The next thing I'm adding is some plant supports, because we do have to manage the vines a little bit, and trust me, this is not a difficult thing. Once I put these plant supports on, in the first couple months that they are growing, I kind of have to take the vines and wrap them around the plant supports. Just every week or so I'll go and just make sure it's wrapping. And once they start training them to wrap around them, they wrap the rest of the way. I don't have to mess with it. And I do 3 levels. Normally, if I'm just doing 4 tiers, I have just 2 levels of these plant supports. But since I have that 5th tier on here, I wanted to do 3 levels just to have something for all of the vines of the different levels to attach to. Before we started this project, though, about 5 weeks ago, I worked on getting my sweet potato slips started. And what I did was I took some of my smaller sweet potatoes that I harvested last summer. I guess it was last fall, really. And I put them in some containers. They're just like these little, I think they're 5-inch pots, and I buried them just a tiny bit. And then I just set them off to the side and they started to grow vines. I also had some vines that had kind of grown and died through the winter, and they were starting to regrow in one of my beds. So I pulled all those out, cut them into about 6 to 9-inch long vines or stems, and then I put them in some water so that they can root. The variety I'm growing this year is I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong, but it's like the Tigan 64. I've heard of a lot of other Florida gardeners growing this one, and they absolutely adore it. So I'm very stoked about growing it. I tried to grow it last year. I had to wait. I got them from Cody Cove Farm, but there's like a wait list to get these slips. And when they had them ready, it was like summertime. And so when they got them to me, I was trying to root them like in June, July, or August, which is not like the best time to start any plants, to be honest with you. And so the sweet potatoes, of all the slips that I had, only one of them actually lived. And so it was kind of slow growing. And then I was taking cuttings from it so that I could grow more, just in case something happened to that one. And it was a whole situation. But because of that, I didn't have as many slips, and I didn't get to try these potatoes, because any of the potatoes I got last fall from them, I had to save as my potatoes to make slips from this year. So I have a decent amount of slips. I still need a little bit more, but I have enough to fill up about half of this GreenStalk right here. So it's 5 times 6 is 30. So I have like 15 or 20 slips from this particular variety. I did go ahead and put some Beauregard orange sweet potatoes down as well. I forgot to do this months ago when I typically do this, but I did it just the other day. So it's going to be another 4 to 6 weeks before those are ready. Those slips are ready. And I'm going to do another GreenStalk like this one, but closer to my shed for that variety. Because just in case this variety doesn't do well for me, even though everyone says that it's going to do well, I want to have my tried and true. And Beauregard is like my tried and true when it comes to sweet potatoes. I have grown the purple ones before. Those are really fun. The purple Japanese ones, they're pretty cool, but I don't like they're kind of grainy. I like the smoother ones. Now here's the slips I was talking about that I took. You can see that they're rooted very nicely. I have some really healthy roots on these. These are ready to be planted. So these are the ones we're going to put in the GreenStalk that we just put together. And it's really simple to do. I take my pointy trowel here and I just make a little diagonal indentation, and then I slide that slip in there, and then I press the soil around it. Now I watered these really deeply a couple minutes ago, so you saw that they were nice and moist, and that sand really holds on to that water those first few days. So I didn't have to water this again for about a week later. But I'm pushing these all the way down for multiple reasons. It's just, there's going to be more water held in the bottom of these containers than the top, so I want to try to push them down as far as possible. And then also, the further they are down, the more insulated they are from the heat. It'll be nice and cool down there instead of super hot like it would be at the top of the container. So a couple things to think about. And sweet potatoes are kind of like tomatoes in that they don't really care how deep you want to plant them. So I plant them pretty deeply, as far as I can possibly put them down. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today as we got both of these green stalks taken care of. I'm so glad it is done. It was so hot. It took a lot of effort, but we got them reset and they're ready to go for the summer. If you want to learn more about strawberries and sweet potatoes, make sure to check out my new Homegrown Florida Gardening Guide. It has all of the details you ever wanted to know about each one of these vegetables. You can find it at homegrownfloridagarden.com. I'll put it down in the description. Happy gardening, you guys.